Hi, welcome back to the course room. This is the presentation that I promised you that I showed you a little bit of in the demonstration of how to do PowerPoint. And I made some modifications to it along the way, but it's something that I did in fairly real time today, between having dinner and stuff like that. But anyway, so I'm going to jump over to my PowerPoint, and then we're going to talk, or I'm going to talk. You may be talking too. I don't know what you're doing on the other end of it, but I'll talk a little bit about ethics, the practice of ethics, and what it is, and how it applies to us as addiction counselors. You might get some ideas here to do your own presentation. You can pick any element of anything that I bring to the table and develop it further if you like. I mean, you can pull a piece out of it and say, okay, I want to talk about beneficence and what that means, and put together a little 5-slide presentation on beneficence. So, you'll have ample opportunity to see more examples of this. While you're looking at this, and I am concentrating more on the delivery of an ethics lesson than I am on the mechanics of PowerPoint on this one, but do pay attention. I'm not, passing myself off as the alpha and omega of presentational organization or anything like that, but I've done a few of them, and pay attention to how they're put together. You'll note again that when I go into my presentation, I don't write a whole bunch of stuff. I do read from a slide, but I don't write a script and then read it to you. I mean, how boring is that? With you reading along with me. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to have my bathroom door over there. There. That's more better. But I'm going to go ahead and go to my PowerPoint. We're going to get started on doing the lecture. Look at how it's put together, and you're free to copy that, the structures and things like that. It's not that creative anyway. When you get right down to it, we tend to follow usual formats. And as I said in the presentation lecture earlier today, introduction, point 1, point 2, point 3, conclude is a way to get through it. Mine's a little busier than that, but the same principle applies, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Here we go. Title page, The Search for the Right and the Good, Ethics in the Addictions Professional. The search for the right and the good, what does it look like? Where do I find it? How will I know? We're born into a world, and I don't really know, as I'm growing up, what to do. Any given day of my life, when I'm presented with situations, problems, activities, whatever, left to myself, I could get in trouble. My parents knew that. So did yours. So they began to lay down some guidelines for us. They began to tell us what it is to be a good boy or a good girl or what have you, and how we should behave, and say yes sir and no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Be sure to put the lid down when you're through, that kind of thing. Little savages that we are, they begin to indoctrinate us into the right and the good as they see it. moving beyond that, we are left, when we get older, when we're growing up, how should we behave? What is moral? What is a correct way of thinking and behaving? And what kind of principles are guiding me? Is it just because mama said so or daddy said so, or can I advance beyond this and begin to think for myself? Should I apply critical thinking to the choice-making process? And when I'm doing that, I may even take some courses, and ethics becomes a field of study. There are people who make a career studying ethics. We have ethicists working in the military, teaching military ethics at West Point. They're in seminaries teaching religious ethics to future priests and preachers and things like that. We go to school, our teachers tell us what it means to be good citizens and what it means to discharge our civic responsibilities and how we should put others into our thinking and have concerns for other people when we're making our choices. Is not so much what the ethics are, it's the fact that the ethics are. Or as a friend of mine said one time, Hitler had ethics. His ethics were different than the rest of ours to a large extent, and that's true. Charlie Manson had ethics, but they were different kind of ethics, So that our morality can be very iffy, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. As a way of thinking and behaving, if I am looking to do the right thing, and I encourage that, I'm not always successful, and sometimes I do the wrong thing for the right reasons, and sometimes I do the right thing for the wrong reasons, or the wrong things for the right reasons and right things for the wrong reasons. I don't think I'm alone in that, though I'm not calling names. But I try to look for the best choices. And I think most people do, really. And if we're not looking for the best ones, we're looking for the most expedients, the ones that we can do quickest and that benefit us the most. And there are people running around doing a lot of that, too. Ethics is also accepted standards of practice that define a profession. Lawyers have rules for lawyers. This is how a lawyer behaves. This is what you can expect from a lawyer. This is what a teacher does. This is how a teacher behaves. This is what you can expect from a teacher. And the same holds true for addiction professionals, medical professionals, doctors, nurses, radiologists, preachers, cops, military men. All have accepted standards of practice that define a profession. One of the things that you'll find, and we'll look at it a little later on, is that we have a rather thorough code of ethics that's published by the National Association of Alcohol and Drug Abuse Counselors that define behavior. And there are short forms of that, too. Also, not all you're taught what's best practices when you go to school. You develop best practices when you go to work out there and are doing your internship. You get your license. You've got lots of guidelines. If you land in a treatment center or if you land in an outpatient counseling center, you probably have policy and procedure manuals that tell you what to do. Come into school as a student. You have ethical responsibilities as a student. And you have right now, taking these classes, you have a distance learning student handbook that I published it in one of my classes. I probably should publish it in this one too. I will. But it's the link's on the homepage, Lee College homepage, that tell you what you're expected to do and how you're expected to behave, and what you can expect from me too, in terms of ethical practices and our standards of practices, if you will. And then we have the thou shalt nots, and that goes back again to parents. Thou shalt not smack your sister, she's a girl. Thou shalt not, take away little cousin Tommy's truck just because you're bigger than him. Thou shalt not shave the cat and glue it to the patio door. There's all kinds of things that we're instructed on as we grow up. Oh, also laws. And laws are basically kind of mandatory ethics. I mean, you either do this or you're in trouble. That's not really ethical behavior. That's staying out of trouble, So we'll talk about that again in a little bit. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. You've probably heard that before. I know I did. Growing up, I've had grown-ups tell me, I didn't mean for it to come out that way. I meant for something, well, that doesn't count. Your intent, this is what happened. This is the outcome. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Howard. Remember that. Okay, I got it. And maybe you feel that way too, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, that we're trying to do right, but we stumble and we fall short of what we hope to accomplish. There was a movie a few years back. It was a stupid movie. I loved it. It was called A Fish Called Wanda. And it's basically a British movie, but it's got John Cleese and Jamie Lee Curtis and stuff in it. But there is a guy in there who's an animal lover, but he's also a hitman. And he's trying to take out a character in a film. And every time he tries to take out this human being, he kills a poodle or a cat or a bird or something like that. And it drives him crazy because he's an animal lover. His intention is to do another thing, not to even to harm something over here, not to harm people over there. Does this sound like an outrageous scenario? It's not. If you're in a military school and you're learning military ethics, they're going to teach you about collateral damages. You don't want to hurt any innocent civilians, but at the same time, you have to take out the enemy combatants. How many innocent citizens are you willing to accept as casualties? What's an acceptable casualty rate? And does the outcome of doing these raids, bombing North Vietnam, Rolling Thunder, Operation Rolling Thunder, you're taking out the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese, but you're also taking out a lot of farmers and babies and all kinds of stuff that are not participants. What's acceptable? And when you start doing what's acceptable, and you know that acceptable is a wrong thing and should not be acceptable, now you're on a kind of a slippery slope, and maybe the road to hell is paved. Not necessarily with good intentions, but within double-bind choices, where you have to make one of any number of choices, none of which you like. You hate them all, but you have to choose. We'll come back to that. If the road to hell is paved with good intentions, so is the road to principled living, where you have honesty, ethics, respect, integrity. You do the right thing because it's the right thing. You're not looking to be rewarded for it. That's pretty highfalutin, isn't it? Sometimes our ethics get down very basic. Let me go through this. How can it be both ways? How can the road to hell be paved with good intention, but the road to principled living can also be paved with good intentions? Well, I'm glad you asked that. because there's a difference between teleology and deontology. And if you don't get anything out of this course but that, you just got two fancy words that you can drop on your spouse or your kids or whatever anytime that you want to pull them up. That's an awful theontological approach to life, isn't it? Teleology and teleology and consequences. Consequences are the ultimate measures. All's well that ends well. Teleology may also embody thinking like the ends justify the means. I'm not a teleologist. I mean, I understand it, and that's all very cool and all, but there are some things, even with the best of outcomes, you just can't do. You just can't do that. And the means, the ends do not justify the means, and the means are not something that we should consider, and there are plenty of things like that. Ethicists are still arguing over the right or wrongness of dropping the Hiroshima bomb. And on one side, the teleologists are saying, it saved thousands of lives. If we hadn't dropped that bomb, we'd have had our troops would have had to invaded the home islands, and it would have been a slaughter. And we not only saved American lives, we saved Japanese lives too by doing that. That's the truth, by the way. That the two bombs took it all out of Japan. They quit, and they were preparing to fight to the bitter end, to the last Japanese. But that's another discussion. The outcomes are divorced from the goodness or badness of what I'm doing, the action that I'm taking. And, and President Harry Truman made a decision to drop a bomb on Hiroshima. And Colonel Paul Tibbets took it upon himself to drop that bomb on Hiroshima. What horrible decisions these men had to make, and they were both secure that it was, in their own minds and their own hearts, that it was the right thing to do under the circumstances. Some of us can't come to that conclusion. We can't drop a bomb on a civilian population that's got people there that are non-combatants. It has our prisoners of war there. They killed Americans too who were in the camps. We can't do that. But we did do that. So consequences are the ultimate measure. All's well that ends well. So that if we get what we have a good outcome that comes out of it, it's what we hope to attain, then the means is justifiable. A girl falls into a river. I didn't think that slide was there, but it was. I may have misorganized just a little bit. No, that's all right. I can do it. Never mind. I'm talking to myself. A girl falls into a river, and you see she's struggling. She's going under. She's drowning. Drowning happens fast, by the way, and it's not very dramatic, like you're led to believe on TV. It's why you got to keep your eye on your kids. Anytime you're around water, it can happen really quickly. But a girl falls into a river, and she's struggling. A young man sees her struggling in the river, and he's a strong swimmer, and he jumps into the water and swims out there and grabs the girl, and he brings her to shore and pulls her up on the bank, and she's coughing and gasping and stuff like that. And he saves her life. That's a good thing, right? I see you shaking your heads. Yes, if you were in the river, you'd hope someone would do something like that for you too. Me too, probably. But suppose the girl jumped in the river on purpose, and she didn't want to be rescued, and she didn't want to be saved. She wanted to end it all. Maybe she's got a terminal illness. This is beginning to sound like a telenovela, huh? But she jumps in the river hoping to end it all, and some Budinsky jumps in and saves her life when she didn't want her life saved. But I know you clever people, you're saying, well, she was struggling and yelling and thrashing about. That's what you do when you're drowning, whether you intended to or not. Just saying. So he pulled her out of and saved her. Did he still do a good thing? We're going to talk about some principles later on to help us make determinations like that. Again, it's who you ask, And even worse, how about our guy's not a very nice guy? He pulls her out of the water so he can rob her, steal her money, steal her purse, rape her, do horrible things. Did he still do a good thing by rescuing her, by pulling her to shore? Not necessarily. So an action has to be judged really both by outcomes and by intent. It doesn't work very well just one way. Deontology says consequences do not determine the goodness or badness of an action, but intentions count. If she's mad at me and pissed off at me because I saved her and she didn't want to be saved, well, I still acted ethically because I saw someone in trouble and I tried to help. The fact that it didn't work out is not as consequential as the intentions that I brought forward. And people do bad things to other people all the time with good intentions, really. Our intent's to instruct them when we punish them, to get them to stop doing things that we think are bad things, like breaking the law or whatever. And so intentions count. So the same girl, the same river, I jump in, I save her, I help her out of the water, I do not rob her, I do not rape her, I do not, take advantage of her in any way. I can walk away saying that to myself, secure in myself that I did a right thing, can I? Or can I? Maybe I'm thinking, shucks, I wonder if anybody saw me do that. Wouldn't it be nice if a television reporter came down and interviewed me about how brave I was about jumping in the water and saving this girl, and maybe her parents will give me a reward. They'll get my picture in the paper. Everything will be, I'll be a hero. That'll be really great. Am I then behaving altruistically? Is my intention good? Because I'm not focusing on saving this girl. I'm focusing on everybody's going to think how great I am. Dang. That's what ethics is about. Some of it. Beliefs and values. Where do they come from? And here's some pretty good places that they come from. We are indoctrinated from birth. We have our parents in our ear. We have a Bible put in front of us. We have the Quran. We have the Holy Scrolls, the Talmud, and other religious writings. We have preachers coming at us, telling us who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be and what God wants us to do. And then we have teachers who are telling us when we're little kids, this is what's important. This is how you should be. This is how you should play with one another. This is how you should treat one another. Come on over here, honey, and pledge allegiance to the flag. This kind of stuff. And I'm not saying, don't hear that I'm popping on these people, because I'm not. I'm not saying that this is a wrong thing. I'm saying it's a thing. That's where our beliefs and values do come from. We don't just in and of ourselves decide that it's wrong to steal from people. We're taught that. We don't in and of our own usually decide it's wrong to take advantage of people because you're bigger than they are. We're usually taught that. And we get a lot of the thou shalt nots from our parents and from the church, right? We get biggies like thou shalt not kill, lie, bear false witness, covet, fornicate, steal, or eat Twinkies. Well, I didn't kill anybody today anyway. Or else. And that's guided his computer. You see the button he's about to push, right? Gary Larson, the cartoonist from The Far Side, he's in that job. If you're doing something to get into heaven or keep out of hell, are you really behaving morally? I mean, seriously, is that moral? You're following the rules, so you're a good person? I'm not following those rules. That makes me a good person because those rules are bad. And then there's other people who are like, what rules? If I am interested in what I get out of it or how I'm perceived, then I'm probably not behaving altruistically. And I'm not sure that there really is when you... There's a theory called Occam's razor. And with Occam's razor, you cut away everything that's not relevant to the discussion, to the point that you're trying to make. And it can become a rather ruthless succession of why. I'm a good person. I'm following the rules. Why? Because the rules make me a good person. Why? Because they're good rules. Why? Until you get down to why you're doing what you're doing. It's also called critical thinking. And I'm not sure that when we engage in altruism, why do you want to do that? You really... a lot of what we call altruism falls by the wayside. It's self-interest is what you get there. Even sometimes with good feelings. I sometimes, do things like contribute some money or to a cause or, do something for someone, and I don't let them know I'm doing it. That's probably because of a Sunday school lesson one time, and they said when you do something for someone, you shouldn't wait for them to thank you. You shouldn't even expect a thank you. You shouldn't let them know you're doing it if you can. And it's a pretty good Sunday school lesson because, I'm old now and I remember it. But anyway, the altruism falls by the wayside when we begin doing that. If I have done something to harm someone, if I have been dishonest, deceitful, if I've stolen something like that, in recovery, I'm supposed to do a personal inventory on that and make amends where I can. And even the big book, even the people in AA will tell you, you're doing that so you can stay sober. That's why you're doing that, Howard. And because, and that's what you should be doing. Father Joe Martin, a lecturer, a priest that talks a lot about alcoholism, and if you hang with us and complete your degree plan, you'll get to know who Joe Martin is for sure, I promise. He said, making amends, saying you're sorry, righting your wrongs is like paying the light bill. If you want to whistle and sing and smile and giggle while you're writing the check, go right ahead. Just pay the damn bill. You make amends because you owe amends, right? Cash register honesty is pretty easy to do sometimes, and you'll see this with your clients. But their logic for getting there can sometimes be a bit alarming. I was sitting in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting 15 years ago, probably, a long time ago. They still had the old-time writers meeting down there off of Minnesota Street in Old Baytown. But I was down there, and I was listening to a guy talk, and this guy was he was on parole, and he had a job, a low-paying job, a manual labor job. Actually, I knew what his job was because I had done it a long, long time ago. His job was to crawl down in the ditch and put these long suction tubes into the ditch and push it down into the mud as far as he could push it. And these tubes would suck the water and mud out, and it would go through a pump and pump it out into a drain in the street. It's hard, it's nasty, it's unpleasant, and no one really wants to do that for a career. I get it. So he's sharing in the meeting, and he said, it was a gratitude meeting, believe it or not. He said, I'm very grateful for this program because it gave me the wherewithal to think things through. I can think things through now, and I'm very happy for that because, you know, I have this crummy job, and it's low pay, and it's nasty, and it was raining, and I have to walk to work in the rain, and before I even get there, I'm soaked and unhappy, and, you know, I was walking past this store, and I saw a bicycle leaned up against the wall there, and I thought, damn, you know, somebody doesn't care about their bicycle. And he said, first thing that crossed my mind was I can get on that bicycle, and I'll be at work like in no time flat. I'll be there in just a couple of minutes. And I can go inside and get warm by the heater and have some coffee and stuff like that before I have to jump in that ditch. But I'm very grateful for this program because it gave me some tools, you know, ways of thinking about this. And I thought, no, what if I took that bicycle and someone saw me do it and dropped a dime on me and told my P.O.? Then I'd go back to prison for 7 more years, man, you know. Or maybe the owner of the bike would come out, and I'd go back to prison for 7 more years. Or a cop sees me taking that bike, I go back to prison for 7 more years. And I thought, it's not worth it. I'll just walk on down the road and go to my job and do my job and everything. And everybody was like, okay, good, and they clapped for me and stuff. And I'm sitting in the back thinking, how about it's not your damn bicycle? How about you're hurting someone when you steal their bike? How about it's wrong to take stuff that isn't yours? And I was a little bit morally outraged for about, I don't know, a minute or two probably. The reality is that some people are never going to get to that place. And so following the rules is going to be the best that they can do. And if that's the case, then I'll settle for that. That said, I'm going to try to help them bridge that gap so that they can do a little more ethical thinking, critical thinking about what is right and what is wrong. Okay, this is interesting, but I'm getting a headache, right? Why go there? Well, it's beautiful when you get there. That's one reason. The unexamined life is not worth living. A philosopher named Plato wrote that. He attributed it to another philosopher who may or may not have lived, I don't know, Socrates in the Apologia. The Apologia looks like apology. That's not what it is. The Apologia is the explanation, and Socrates is to be executed. He's given a choice. He can either be executed or be banished from the city of Athens, and he chose to be executed, even though his disciples, his followers, said, "Go, no, go be banished. You can live and be free." And he said, "Be free to be who? Free to be what? This is who I am. This is where I am. I'm Socrates. I'm the Athenian. I don't know how to be anything else." And he drank his hemlock. The unexamined life is not worth living is a concept that's been chewed over for a couple of thousand years. If you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you want, if you don't know what you believe, if you don't know what's important to you, are you really even living? You know, is it something? Are you doing better than the beasts of the field, so to speak? So that brings us to ethical principles that guide our thinking. If I'm going to think about how I behave in my world and how I react to people around me and how I make my choices going through my life, then and these are only 5 ethical principles here, dear hearts. There's many, many more of them, and you can go dig them out if you want to. I mean, this is a fascinating field of study, and there's just levels after levels after levels of it. But like the big book says, in your recovery, you try to practice these principles in all your affairs, right? I try to practice justice, autonomy, beneficence, fidelity, non-maleficence in my dealings with other people and in my relationships and with my interactions and with my clients, for sure. Justice in counseling relates to fairness, equitable access of services, treating every client with dignity, with respect, giving them access to services, non-discrimination. Every client's important. Every client deserves your best effort. One of my old professors, way back in the day, told me, he said, you know, H, when you walk into your office one morning, there'll be 4 clients there, right? And these 4 clients are the ones you're going to work with today. 2 of them are not ready. It does not matter what you do. They're there for other reasons than recovery. They're not committed to getting better. Maybe they're doing it for someone else. Maybe to get their parole paper signed. Whatever reason, they're not ready. And no matter what you do, they're going to drop out of treatment. Then you have another one there, the 3rd client that's there, and you can't mess him up. He's ready to get well. He's sick and tired of being sick and tired. You can tell him to wear a chicken bone around his neck, and he'll stay sober and it'll work. Stand on his head naked in the corner. He'll do it, you know, because he's ready to do it. And you can't mess him up. And then there's that 4th client. And the 4th client is the one that's on the fence. He could fall off on either side. He's not committed one way or another. He is of 2 minds. He's ambiguous, or ambivalent rather, not ambiguous. He's ambivalent. He's of 2 minds. He wants it and he doesn't want it. And that's where your skills come into play. Here's the rub, though. You don't know which of those clients is which. So every client deserves your best effort. You work like hell with all 4 of them, you know? And that's the way it goes. I've never done an empirical study to make sure his data was correct. It was just an analogy, so I'm okay with that. But justice, I treat everyone with the best I got. It doesn't mean I treat everyone equally, and I treat a lot of people differently, but no matter how I treat them, it's the best I got for that person at that time. That's where I try to be just. Also, I have to take into consideration autonomy. When someone comes in to see me as a practitioner, they know more about their life than I do. And I have to give them the wherewithal to make their decisions, because my decisions may not be the best decisions for people. I'm not, it's not a good idea to elect me your higher power, because I am not all knowing, all powerful, and sometimes I may say something, off the cuff that will have consequences for you. It's the client's life. They need to be informed of what you're doing. They need to have a right to choose to participate, to not participate, to stay, to go, whatever. Beneficence, as a principle, means to act in the absence of malice and to do good. Very important. Everything I do will be with the best intentions and best outcomes for my client. When we agree to work together in counseling, I'm on your side, and I'm going to be advocating and doing what I can to make sure that you have a good outcome. I will never do anything intentionally to harm you, and everything that I do with the best of my intentionality will be for your benefit. Fidelity, loyalty, being trustworthy, doing what I say, holding to confidentiality. Back in the old days when I was a face-to-face classroom teacher, about 7 months ago, was it that long? No, longer than that. Anyway, pre-March, pre-COVID, BC, before COVID. Back in those days, we had the classroom discussions, and we'd talk about things. And a lot of times, one of the FAQs, frequently asked questions that I've gotten in this business, being an instructor and training substance abuse counselors, is, Mr. B, how can I get people to trust me? How do I get people to trust me? And the answer to that is fairly simple, but it's not the ones that people want to hear. The way you get people to trust you is to be trustworthy. Trust is a decision. It's not a feeling. It's not a guarantee. It's not, it's a decision. I decide that I'm going to take a risk with you. And I may evaluate you before I make that decision. And I'll watch you, and I'll see if you do and I'll maybe give you a little bit at a time and see what you do. And then I'll pull it back. If you do what you say you're going to do, if you keep your promises to me, if you hold to confidentiality, if you're loyal to me, then I'll be loyal back. So my job as a counselor is to be trustworthy. And then it's up to the client, and that goes back to autonomy too, about whether they're going to trust me or not. It's entirely up to them. And finally, non-maleficence. When I first got into the business, I did some volunteering as well, and I volunteered with Parents United of East Harris County. Actually, my supervisor I was working for DAAC over in Deer Park, one Fräulein Siglinde Boise, had recruited me into working with Parents United. And they are, I don't even know if they're still in existence, really. It was a long time ago. But at the time, we were working with sex offenders, adults who'd been molested as children. We had a kids group, and I was working with a girl, a lady, in the offenders group. So it was one of the more unique experiences of my career. It was odd, is what it was. I'm trying to look for a nice political way to say this group was weird. And it was an admix of people who largely were men. All of them were men. There were a couple of women there. Women do sex crimes too. But largely men. And, anyway, some of them had already been convicted and were waiting to be sentenced, or they'd pled guilty and were on probation or something. And when we were going through the group process, they could speak openly about things. And some of the other men in there, some of the other members of the group, would say things like, well, if I had done what I've been accused of, I probably would have been feeling and yada yada. And I couldn't, that was just weird to me, that they were talking around this issue like it was hypothetical. Now, I was fairly new to counseling too, so that was a trial by fire for sure. And then I discovered why. One guy said, well, I did it. I did what they accused me of. I molested my stepdaughter, and the lady that was facilitating the group, and I was only in there as an assistant co-facilitator person, took right off out of there and called the police and said this guy admitted in the front of, a dozen and a half witnesses that he had done this, and he was arrested again. And, I talked to my supervisor, Sir Glenda, and then I talked to this lady, and I said, you can't be doing that. You can't, tell people in group that, that you're going to hold things confidentiality and then confidential and then drop a dime on them. Now, the rule is, and you'll see this when you look at the ethical standards that DAAC publishes. The rule is that you report sexual abuse no matter what. And we didn't have to report that because the guy was already being accused of it. There was already an investigation. So what this lady did is she supplied evidence on a guy that basically took him out of the group, where we could have done him any good. And when I kind of confronted her on it, she went off on me and said, I hate sex offenders. I was abused when I was a child and yada, yada, yada. And my heart goes out to her, as that's her reality. But you can't come into group to punish your clients. You can't do that. It is antithetical to everything that we're trying to do, And part of what we're doing is based on the assumption that, people can change and they don't have to be, a slave to their past. But non-maleficence came into play there, and fidelity. She was not loyal to her client. She did act with intent to harm, and she meant to do it. So it gets a little sticky when you're talking about here's a situation and what should we do with it. The first and most important principle of the helping professions is primum non nocere, and that means first do no harm. Just sounds really cool when you say it in Latin, huh? Primum non nocere. First, do no harm. You can't help everybody, but don't hurt anyone. Don't do something that will hurt somebody. Don't fail to do something that will hurt somebody. And here's your DAAC Code of Ethics. And I'm going to click on it for a minute. I'm not going to stay there long because it's pretty lengthy. But it takes you over here. And the introduction to DAAC NCCAP ethical standards, and it's pretty long. There are ethics webinars here that you can go to and look at. I encourage that. I know that you're probably not, unless I put some grade points on it, but I'm not. I'm just saying, here it is. You can look at ethics webinars if you want to. And here are some links to take you to the ethical standards. And as you can see, it's a little bit lengthy. multiple therapist boundaries, dual relationships, etc., and so forth. And we're going to talk about ethics in other courses too, confidentiality and privileged communications. Some of you in this class now may have already had, brushed up against the DAAC ethical codes, or we've talked about them in another course. But again, these are adopted formal guidelines. This is how we expect people to behave who are working as practitioners in the field of addiction counseling. Rules do not, however, cover all circumstances, and that's why we have ethical dilemmas. And what do I do if something happens and I don't know what to do? I made a very bad decision once upon a time when I was a young counselor, when I was just coming into the field. And I was talking to a guy, and I liked him. He was, an old blue-collar construction worker, and I had just recently been an old blue-collar construction worker, and we kind of hit it off. And he was telling me about, about his drinking and his problems and, that kind of thing. And we'd met a couple of times, and I told him, he was covered by federal confidentiality regulations and that I wouldn't disclose anything without his permission. And then one day, about the third time or something like that, when I've been seeing him, he said, everything I say to you is just between us, right? And I said, yeah, of course. Everything's just between us. And he said, that goddamn stepdaughter of mine, she's making me crazy. She's just running wild, and doing stuff. And she came home loaded at about 3 a.m, and I confronted her, and she told me to get my fat ass out of her way. She was going to bed, and I decked her, and she was like 15. And I said, you what? He said, yeah. He said, I decked her. He said, I just popped. He said, I knocked her on her ass and dared her to get up, and she wouldn't. And so I went to talk to my supervisor, because now I think, here's this guy, this grown-up man in his 40s, and he's telling me he's punching out a girl who's 15, and what am I going to do with that? And so Glenda said, you know what you're going to do with that, you just don't want to do it, which is true. I knew what I had to do with that. If we have an adult who's punching on a child, we can't keep that to ourselves. That exceeds the limits of confidentiality. But there's another dilemma here, too. I had committed to keeping things between us. And so basically, when I called CPS and got them involved, I betrayed him. There is no nice way to put it. I told him, anything you say is between us, and then he said something, and I said, well, not that, and I had another dilemma, because I had worked with CPS before on, I didn't work for CPS. I was not a child advocate or anything like that, but I've been involved with them before in cases where, kids were being abused and stuff among my clientele. And anyway, so I dropped a dime, and I kind of knew the outcome before I did it, but I still had to do it because, obeying the law. Rules, right? I called them and told them what the situation was, and they sent a Kai's worker out there, and the Kai's worker said, did you smack your stepdaughter? And he said, no, of course not. I don't do stuff like that. And they asked stepdaughter, did he smack you? And she said, no, he doesn't do anything like that. And she said, okay, case closed. And I got a call that was kind of F you very much, you rotten lying son of a bitch. And there wasn't a lot I could do about that. I I knew what I had to do to follow the rules. I also had an idea that probably the outcome wouldn't be good, and the outcome wasn't, because I think we were getting somewhere. And I effectively removed my ability to be helpful to this guy by doing what I did, what the law required of me. So we live life in shades of gray. Like I was talking about with the military ethicist, how many lives of innocent people am I willing to throw into this mix? What's acceptable to me? There are 15 choices here, and I don't like any of them, none of them. And that's generally the circumstance when you're in an ethical bind, is that you don't like the choices that you have, but somebody's got to make the choice, and it's on you. So I don't like any of the choices. I have to think, again, back to a principled and disciplined approach to making decisions. In terms of what to do next in circumstances where I don't like the choices and I have to choose one, I look at what ethical principles are in play. Is it fidelity, justice, beneficence, non-maleficence? What's involved? What does my, what do my guidelines say? Are there guidelines that cover what I'm facing? What consequences are likely? Who's likely to be affected by this? How are they likely to be affected? What's the best outcome for all people concerned? Teleology again, right? Whatever I have to do to get the good outcome. The good of the many outweighs the good of the one. Conclusion. Boy, that was abrupt, wasn't it? Ethical guidelines help define a profession. Ethical thinking is a discipline. So's ethical choices. And for people working in the treatment field, we have our guidelines, lots of them. We have the longer versions, the shorter versions, but we have other resources too. We have policy manuals and procedural manuals that are, there for us at most of the agencies where we work, and what to do if clients do this, and what to do if clients do that, and how to behave if this occurs, those sorts of things. Supervision is real important. And one of the things that I do in the cooperative education classes that we have when you're doing your co-op hours, your practicums, your clinicals out on a job site, is I offer my services, as a sounding board for you, as an advisor from the profession and from the school, and so that's a plus. Where people really tend to get in trouble with this kind of stuff is when they're making decisions in a vacuum, and they're making quick decisions, and they're shooting from the hip. If you've got a choice to make that's going to affect a bunch of people's lives, you probably better consider that. You might want to talk it over with people, not just with one person. That's people, plural, right? There is no policy or procedure manual that exists that cover all the circumstances that we're going to find. Laws, rules, regulations, those are almost always what we call oh shit contingency. Something happens and we go, oh shit, write a rule, so that we'll know what to do when that happens again. There we are. And here I are. That's my ethics presentation for you. That link that's on one of those slides that you have available to you, I'll post it in the course room, so you have a live link you can go to in the course room and pick it up. I don't know if it'll let you do it on the film. I don't know. but it will if I post the link live for you. I'm thinking probably you have some questions, and you probably have some things that you might have want to say. Could you clarify that? I don't know how to handle that on video type, but you can certainly email me or give me a call or set up an appointment if you want to, and we'll talk about it. I'm thinking that maybe a couple of times during the course of the next few weeks, I might send you a link, as a class, and say for an hour or so, hour or two, I'll be available if y'all want to have a discussion. That's up to you. So that's that. I'll see y'all on the next one.